The first thing you need to know is this family is not always love. Sometimes, it's a performance. A carefully staged illusion where affection is rationed out like currency. And the price for belonging is obedience. I learned that lesson the hard way. On a winter morning that smelled of cold marble, expensive perfume, and danger. 12 years of. The elevator doors slid open with a low mechanical sigh, and for a moment, I caught my reflection in the mirrored steel. 32 years old, pressed suit, steady eyes. A woman who looked like she belonged in this building. But inside, my stomach was a hurricane. I tightened my grip on the leather strap of my bag. I wasn't naive. Patricia, my adoptive mother, didn't invite me to a downtown law firm just to share coffee and memories. She was a woman who planned in shadows, who smiled only when there was a knife in her hand. If she had called this meeting, it wasn't to talk. It was to conquer. And I was walking straight into her chosen battlefield. The receptionist barely looked up from her screen. Conference room C. They're waiting. That one word sat like ice in my chest. I pushed open the heavy oak door, and there they were, arranged like an execution panel. Patricia sat at the head of the long table, pearls gleaming at her throat. 12 years of. The picture of Grace if you didn't know her well enough to hear the venom beneath her smile. Beside her was Uncle Robert, suit crisp, gaze sharp as a blade. My siblings, James and Linda, flanked them like bodyguards, though the distance in their eyes told me they weren't here out of loyalty. They were here out of hunger. But it was the three men in matching gray suits across from them that stole my breath. Lawyers. Patricia hadn't come to talk. She had come to strip me bare. Grace. Patricia's voice carried that honeyed tone she used in front of strangers. Finally. Sit. We've been waiting. Her hand gestured at the chair opposite her, a queen summoning her pawn. I slid into the seat, careful to keep my face unreadable, though my hands trembled in my lap. On the polished table, before me lay a neat stack of documents, each marked with yellow tabs where my signature was expected. Transfer of inheritance rights. Of course. Patricia didn't even try to soften the blow. Let's not waste time. You know why we're here? I looked at the papers, then at her. Do I? Her smile deepened. A flash of teeth without warmth. Your grandmother was confused in her final months. 12 years of. The will she left isn't representative of her true intentions. We're here to correct that mistake. For the good of the family. The word family landed like a stone in my chest. 24 years of being told I wasn't really part of it. 24 years of being the charity case at Patricia's table. And now, suddenly, I was family. Again, because I had something they wanted. I glanced around the room. James, leaning back with false confidence, his designer watch glinting under the lights. Linda, clutching a handbag worth more than my car. Robert, old lawyer's instincts ready to pounce. And Patricia, the orchestrator, pearls glowing like armor. This was no family meeting. This was an ambush. My throat went dry, but I forced my voice steady. You brought lawyers. Of course. Robert's smirk was practiced, smug. This is a matter of law. A substantial inheritance should belong to the family, not, he paused, savoring the word, an outsider. There it was, outsider, not daughter, not sister, not equal, outsider. A memory pressed itself into my mind, uninvited but sharp. I was 8 years old again, standing in the Mitchells' kitchen with a backpack of clothes after my parents' funeral. 12 years of. Patricia had crouched in front of me, that same smile stretched across her face. We'll take care of you, Grace. You should feel grateful. Not everyone would take in someone else's child. Not their child. Someone else's. I blinked the memory away and leaned forward, folding my hands over the unsigned documents. And if I refuse? The silence that followed was thick with anticipation. Patricia's lips curved into something colder than a smile. Then we'll destroy you. Her words sliced through the air like glass. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. James leaned in, his tone falsely reasonable. Look, Grace, we're not saying you don't deserve something, but 2.5 million of years of. While I'm struggling to keep my position at the company and Linda can't find work. It's not fair. Not fair? Linda echoed, her nails tapping on her designer bag. We're her real grandchildren. The word real stung more than I wanted to admit. One of the lawyers, a thin man with eyes like cold steel, slid a document toward me. Sign here, Miss Mitchell. This is voluntary. Refuse. And will be forced to file for undue influence, elder abuse, fraud. Your license as a nurse would not survive the investigation. Elder abuse. Fraud. 12 years of. They weren't just trying to steal my inheritance, they were trying to salt the earth of my life. For a heartbeat. The room blurred. My chest tightened, breath shallow. They thought I was cornered. 12 years of. That the scared little girl who'd once been grateful for scraps would bow her head again. But they didn't know me anymore. Because what Patricia and her courtroom circus didn't see was the faint buzz of my phone in my purse. One word flashing on the screen from a man who had been waiting for this very moment. In position. I straightened, forcing calm into my voice. Before I sign anything, I said, I need to make a call. Patricia's smile sharpened. No calls. Decide now. Or we file this afternoon. I looked at her. At the pearls, the smile. The carefully arranged mask she had worn for decades. And for the first time in years, I felt no fear. Only clarity. Because what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Eleanor, my grandmother in every way that mattered, had seen this coming. And she had made her move long before Patricia laid her trap. I set my hand on the unsigned papers, leaned back in my chair, and let the silence stretch. If family was going to be a battlefield, then I was finally ready to fight. The room seemed frozen after my refusal to sign. Patricia's eyes narrowed, her smile brittle. Robert's fingers tapped against the mahogany table in sharp little beats like a gavel coming down. The lawyers shifted in their seats, expecting my collapse. But instead of giving them that satisfaction, I leaned back, folding my arms. I'd learned long ago that silence could be louder than shouting. And while the silence pressed in around me, my mind slipped backward. Not because I wanted to retreat, but because memories had a way of reminding me why I was sitting here at all. Cue a different kind of family. I was 15 the day Eleanor moved into the house. Patricia had complained about the burden before her mother-in-law even arrived, the inconvenience, the expense, the disruption to her household routine. But when Eleanor walked through the door, silver hair pinned neatly, eyes sharp as a hawk's, something shifted in me. Unlike Patricia, she didn't study me with calculation. She didn't glance at me the way people sometimes glance at stray dogs. Half pity, half irritation. She looked at me as though I was simply there. Present. Valid. Grace, is it? She asked, her voice warm, slightly gravelly with age. Yes, ma'am, I muttered, uncertain. She smiled. Not ma'am, grandma. That's who I am now. It startled me. No hesitation, no distance. Just a title given freely, like a chair pulled out at a table where I had never been invited to sit. That night, while Patricia fumed about the extra grocery bill, Eleanor sat me down in her study, a chessboard between us. Show me what you know, she said. I didn't know anything, but she taught me patiently every evening after dinner. Each move was a lesson. Don't rush your queen. Guard your pawns. Look at the whole board, not just the piece in front of you. Back then, I didn't realize she wasn't just teaching me chess. She was teaching me survival. To the weight of exclusion. Those years left scars that still burn under my skin. James's 16th birthday, an ice sculpture, a BMW's in the driveway, and Patricia crying happy tears if her son had just been crowned king. I wasn't allowed in the photos. You understand. Patricia whispered to me in the kitchen, her nails digging lightly into my shoulder. This is a family moment. Alinda's graduation trip to Paris. They returned with gifts for each other. Laughter spilling down the hallways. Stories I wasn't part of. When I asked Patricia if I could see the photos, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Paris is for family. And Christmas after Christmas." When the card mailed out to friends and colleagues showed smiling faces. Patricia, Robert, James, Linda. While I hovered in the background, cropped out before ink ever touched paper. It was Eleanor who kept me whole. 12 years of. She bought me my first set of nursing textbooks when Patricia told me, "Community college is all you'll ever manage." She slipped me money for groceries when my paycheck barely stretched past rent. And when I asked her once why she cared so much, she placed her wrinkled hand over mine and said, "Because you're mine, Grace. You may not see it, but you are." That single sentence had carried me through years of being the invisible child. Back in the ambush, Patricia's voice yanked me out of the memory. "You've had long enough to think," she said, her patience thinning. "This money is not yours to hoard." Mother wasn't herself. She didn't know what she was doing. Her words landed heavy, but inside, I felt something stir, something sharper than fear. Anger. Because I had been there in those final months, watching Eleanor's mind remain sharp, even as her body grew frail. I had read books aloud to her in the evenings, listened as she whispered strategies while we played chess on the bed tray. I had held her hand when the nights grew too cold for sleep. Patricia hadn't been there. Not once. James leaned forward, his voice smooth, practiced. "Look, Grace, this doesn't have to be ugly. Just sign the papers, and everything goes away. We can all move on." I studied his face. The carefully groomed hair, the practiced charm. I thought about how often he had ignored me growing up. Years of. How he had once borrowed money from me in college and never paid it back, brushing it off with a laugh. Linda chimed in next, her tone shrill. "You don't even need this money. You're single. No kids, no mortgage. What would you even do with millions? At least with us, it stays in the family." That word again. Family. Use it like a blade, slicing me out of it. One of the lawyers cleared his throat, sliding the document closer again. "Voluntary transfer, Miss Mitchell. If you refuse, we'll pursue elder abuse charges. Given your position as her caregiver, a jury will find the circumstances suspicious. You could lose everything." The others nodded as if it were inevitable. But what none of them realized was that while they played intimidation games, I had already made a move of my own. I let my hand rest lightly on my bag, where my phone still vibrated with silent reassurance. In position. Eleanor's secret. The truth was, Eleanor had seen the storm before I did. One night, 2 years before she passed, I'd found her in the study with 3 strangers. Serious men and women with folders, pens, and a small camera on a tripod. She didn't hide what she was doing. She looked at me, eyes twinkling, and said, "Just some estate planning, dear. Nothing to worry about." I had believed her then. But later, 12 years of, as I drifted to sleep on the couch outside her room, I remembered the way she had smiled during a chess match. Calm. Certain, always 3 moves ahead. And suddenly, 12 years of, in the sterile law office with Patricia's lawyers, breathing down my neck, I understood. Eleanor had not just left me money. She had left me a fortress. a plan. The pressure rises, Patricia's patience broke. She shoved the pen toward me, her voice cold. Sign it, Grace. Stop being selfish for once in your life. Think about James's children. Think about Linda's future. Think about this family that gave you everything. I stared at the pen, and in that moment, another memory surfaced. Eleanor's voice whispering to me over the chessboard. In chaos, Grace, the calm player controls the board. I breathed deeply, steadying my hands. I wouldn't give them chaos. I would give them silence and certainty. Lifting my eyes, I said quietly, if I sign, it'll be when my lawyer is here. Patricia laughed, sharp and bitter. Your lawyer? Don't be ridiculous. You can't afford one. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. 12 years of. Because I already knew what she didn't, that Eleanor had made sure I'd never face this moment alone. The slow realization, something flickered across Robert's face. A twitch of uncertainty. A recognition that maybe, just maybe, they had underestimated me. I caught it, and I held on to it. 12 years of. The game had only just begun, but for the first time since stepping into the room, I wasn't afraid. Because if Eleanor had taught me anything, it was this pawns survive when they stopped playing like pawns. The pen slid across the polished surface like a dagger. Patricia's manicured hand lingered on it, steady, deliberate. Her eyes never left mine. Sign, she said, the sweetness drained from her voice. Do it now. For a moment, I let my gaze rest on the pen. The weight of every unspoken threat pressed down on me. The destruction of my career. The accusations of elder abuse. The promise of financial ruin. I could almost see the headlines they wanted splashed across the news. Nurse exploits dying grandmother for fortune. The kind of story that would haunt me forever. I should have been afraid. And part of me was. My chest tightened. My palms damp. But fear wasn't what rose strongest in me. What rose was anger. Anger. At the woman who had reminded me for 24 years that I wasn't truly hers. Anger at the siblings who had inherited privilege and still wanted more. Anger at the way they used the word family like a lock on a cage. I looked at Patricia, at James, at Linda, and I finally saw them for what they were. Not a family, not even opponents worthy of respect, but scavengers circling what they thought was prey, and I wasn't prey. Not anymore. I pushed the pen back across the table. No. The silence that followed was sharp, like glass shattering. Patricia's face froze, then cracked. No. No. My voice was steady, stronger than I felt. I won't sign. And I won't be bullied. Her pearls trembled as she leaned forward. You don't have a choice, Grace. You think the world will believe you over us. A stray taken in out of pity. Not pity, Robert added, his voice booming like a gavel. Charity, and now you repay us with betrayal. Linda shook her head in mock sadness. You've always been ungrateful. Always. Ungrateful. The word echoed through me, tugging at old wounds. 8-year-old me, sitting at the kitchen table with secondhand clothes, told to smile and say thank you. 15-year-old me, handed leftovers while the others ate steak, told to feel lucky. For years, I had carried that guilt like a stone in my chest. But right now, in this suffocating room, the stone cracked. I was a child, I said softly. Children don't owe receipts for being fed. Children don't owe gratitude for being clothed. That's not charity. 12 years of. That's what a family is supposed to do. Patricia's eyes narrowed. You don't get to lecture me about family. Everything you are, you owe to us. I felt my lips curve into something dangerously close to a smile. Funny. Because everything I am, I owe to Grandma. The air shifted, just slightly. Enough that Patricia's composure flickered. Robert tried to cover it with bluster. Your so-called grandmother was manipulated in her final months. Any judge will see that. Really? I ask, keeping my tone calm. Because she wasn't the one who manipulated. She was the one who planned. James frowned. Planned what? I let the silence stretch, savoring their discomfort. Then I leaned forward, my voice low. She knew this day would come, and she prepared for it. For the first time since I'd entered the room, I saw fear flicker in Patricia's eyes. 2. The rising storm, the youngest lawyer cleared his throat, trying to recover ground. Be that as it may, Miss Mitchell, our complaint is already drafted. Once filed, the burden will be on you to prove innocence. Do you really want your life dissected in court? I didn't look at him. I kept my gaze on Patricia, whose mask was slipping by the second. Funny thing about courts, I said. They like evidence. Her lips parted, but no words came, because in that moment, my phone buzzed again. A vibration so soft it was almost inaudible, but to me it was thunder. One word. Ready. Memory as weapon. I closed my eyes briefly, and Eleanor's voice came back to me. Those nights we played chess. Her hand warm on mine. Patricia counts money in her sleep, Grace. 12 years of. Robert would sue his own shadow if he thought it owed him. And James and Linda will follow wherever the greed flows. When I'm gone, they'll come for you. Be ready. She had been right about everything, and she had left me tools. I opened my eyes, meeting Patricia's gaze with a calm I hadn't felt until now. You know, I said, Grandma once told me the difference between us. You all wanted what she had. I just wanted her. For a flicker of a moment, silence held. And then Patricia snapped. You ungrateful parasite. She surged to her feet, hands flat on the table. Her voice cracked with fury. We fed you, clothed you, gave you shelter when no one else wanted you. And now you dare too. The door opened. The twist, every head turned. In walked a man in his 70s, silver-haired, dressed in a suit, so precise it seemed cut from authority itself. He carried a leather briefcase, worn but polished. His presence filled the room, calm yet undeniable. Good morning, he said, his voice rich and unhurried. I'm Harold Harrison, senior partner at Harrison & Cranky. I believe you're discussing my client's inheritance. The word client hit the room like a bomb. Patricia blinked, stunned. Your what? Client. He set his briefcase on the table, opening it with deliberate precision. Miss Grace Mitchell has been under my legal protection for 6 months. At the request of the late Eleanor Mitchell. James's mouth opened, then shut again. Linda gripped her handbag tighter. Robert's practiced smirk faltered, and Patricia finally lost her smile. This is outrageous, she spat. Grace can't afford a lawyer like you. She doesn't have to. Harrison's eyes glinted with quiet amusement. Her grandmother retained me long before her passing, anticipating, quite accurately, that this meeting would occur. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in my life, I watched Patricia scramble. A shift in power. Harrison spread a thick folder across the table, stamped with seals. Before we proceed, he said smoothly, I should inform you that this building's conference rooms are under audio-visual surveillance. Your earlier threats have already been documented. The lawyers Patricia had brought stiffened. One of them swallowed hard. Threats? Robert demanded, voice cracking just slightly. Harrison's smile was polite, razor sharp. Threats of coercion, elder abuse accusations, professional sabotage. All captured. All admissible. He turned to me then, and in his calm eyes, I saw what Eleanor must have seen all along: strength, patience, certainty. Patricia tried to recover. This is a setup. No, Harrison interrupted, his tone firm but even. This is foresight. Eleanor Mitchell was no fool. She was a strategist. And she left very clear instructions for this moment. He tapped the folder once, deliberately. Shall we review them? The room was dead silent. I felt my chest rise with a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. 12 years of. For the first time since I'd entered this building, the weight lifted. Because this wasn't just my fight anymore. 12 years of. Eleanor was still here. Through Harrison, through the paper trail, through every step she'd taken to protect me. Patricia's pearls trembled. Her voice, when it came, was thin. You think you've won, Grace? I leaned forward, meeting her gaze. No. Grandma won. I'm just here to watch. For a moment, no one breathed. The only sound was the faint hum of the overhead lights and the slow, deliberate click of Harold Harrison's briefcase as he withdrew a thick folder. Patricia's pearls no longer gleamed like armor. They trembled, ever so slightly, against her throat. This is absurd, she said, her voice sharp, brittle. Grace doesn't have the capacity to manage this kind of money. She's naive, reckless. She'll waste it. Harrison raised a brow, unruffled. And you believe yourself more capable. Her eyes flared. I built this family. No. I cut in before I realized the word had left my mouth. You built walls. Around yourself, around James and Linda. Around the illusion of perfection you needed the world to see. Patricia's head snapped toward me, her mask cracking. Don't you dare lecture me. The lawyers she had brought shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between Harrison and me. The certainty that had once filled their posture was draining like sand through fingers. Robert tried to salvage control. He leaned forward, voice booming, the old courtroom actor returning. You think one lawyer will save you, Grace? We have grounds to contest. A non-blood relative inheriting everything while the biological family receives nothing. Judges overturn wills like that every day. Harrison's lips curved in something dangerously close to amusement. But Eleanor anticipated that argument. She left provisions. He slid the folder across the table, opening it with deliberate care. Inside lay notarized documents, sealed envelopes, and a small tablet. Patricia's face drained of color. Provisions. Linda echoed, her voice thin. Harrison tapped the documents. An irrevocable trust, established 2 years before Eleanor's passing. With penalty clauses, I might add. Clauses designed to activate if any member of this family attempted precisely what you're doing now. James shifted uneasily. Penalty clauses. Yes. Harrison's tone was calm, clinical. In essence, if you pursue legal action or coercion, the estate automatically transfers additional funds, significant funds, to Grace, at your expense. The color bled from Robert's face. That's extortion. That's foresight, Harrison corrected. The weight of his words sank into the room like lead. The attempt to break me, Patricia rallied, her voice rising with desperation. This is manipulation! Grace, can't you see? He's feeding you lies. Your grandmother wasn't herself in the end. She didn't know what she was doing. Stop, I whispered. Patricia froze. I hadn't raised my voice, but something in me had shifted, like a door closing softly but firmly. You weren't there? I said, each word slow, steady. Not in the hospital at 2 a.m. when she couldn't breathe. Not when she asked me to read her favorite book. One more time. Not when she played chess with me the night before she passed, moving pieces with a hand that barely had strength left. She was herself until the last breath. You just didn't care enough to see it. The silence that followed was raw, cutting. Linda's eyes glistened, but she said nothing. James looked down at the table, jaw clenched. Robert shifted in his seat, unable to meet my gaze. Only Patricia held steady, though her voice cracked when she finally spoke. We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us. I almost laughed, almost. Instead, I leaned forward. You didn't give me anything. 12 years of. You reminded me every day that I didn't belong, that I was lucky to be in your house. You treated me like a bill you couldn't wait to stop paying. Patricia's face hardened. That's not true. It is, I said. And the sad thing is, I still tried. For years, I tried to earn my place. Until Eleanor made me realize I didn't have to earn what I already was. Her family. The receipts Patricia snapped then, reaching into her bag with trembling hands. She slapped a thick folder onto the table and shoved it toward Harrison. Do you want evidence? She hissed. Here's evidence. Every dollar we spent on her for 24 years. Clothes, food, dental work, school fees. Even that prom dress she wore once. Every penny. Itemized. Don't tell me we didn't sacrifice. The folder gaped open, pages bristling with decades of receipts. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Receipts. For feeding me, clothing me. My throat burned, my vision blurred. I had always known Patricia saw me as a burden, but to see my childhood reduced to line items, to ink and totals, it broke something I didn't even know was still intact. I forced myself to look at her. You kept receipts, I whispered. For raising a child. Patricia didn't flinch. Yes, because you were never mine. And now, you think you deserve millions after everything we spent keeping you alive. The words hit like knives. And yet, as they cut, something inside me hardened. For the first time, I felt no shame, no guilt, only clarity. You're right, I said softly. I was never yours. And that's the best thing that ever happened to me. Harrison's calm. Harrison slid the receipts back toward her, his expression unreadable. Mrs. Mitchell, your argument is fascinating, but irrelevant. Grace's legal standing is absolute. And more importantly, Eleanor foresaw precisely this tactic. Patricia blinked. What? Harrison opened another envelope, pulling out a signed statement. 2 years ago. Eleanor documented her suspicion that you would attempt to reduce Grace's claim to what you considered her cost. She specifically described it as cruel, manipulative, and, her words, not mine, evidence of emotional abuse. Patricia's lips parted, but no sound came. Harrison continued, his voice calm, relentless. That statement, along with others, is notarized and supported by video testimony. We can proceed to review that now, unless you prefer to settle this quietly. The air in the room grew heavy, thick with dread. The inner war, I sat in silence, staring at the receipts still fanned out before me. Childhood, reduced to numbers. A part of me wanted to crumble, to run from the table, and never look back. Because no matter how much strength I'd built, some wounds never truly healed. But then I remembered Eleanor's hand closing around mine, firm and sure. You were always enough, Grace. Always. I straightened, drawing a deep breath. For the first time, I looked Patricia dead in the eye without flinching. You think these papers prove your sacrifice, I said, voice steady. But all they prove is that you never loved me. And that's something money can't erase. The words left my mouth like arrows. And when they landed, Patricia's mask cracked, just slightly, enough for me to see the fury beneath. The stage is set. Harrison closed his folder with a decisive snap. We're done with intimidation. Either you acknowledge Eleanor's will, or we move to the next stage. Robert leaned forward, but his voice lacked the confidence it once held. And what, exactly, is the next stage? Harrison's smile was thin, razor, sharp. Eleanor prepared her final testimony. On video. In this very building. With witnesses. It speaks for itself. The words hung in the air like a thundercloud. Patricia swallowed hard, but her defiance remained. Show it, then. Let's see what lies you've all cooked up. Harrison's fingers rested on the tablet, but he didn't press play. Not yet. Instead, he looked at me. "Grace," he said gently. "Are you ready for this?" I nodded, though my heart pounded, because I knew what came next would change everything. The tablet screen glowed faintly in the dim light of the conference room. Everyone's eyes fixed on it. Even the lawyers Patricia had hired, who now sat with their pens hovering uselessly, waiting for something they hadn't prepared for. Harrison didn't rush. He let the silence stretch until the tension was a living thing in the room, thick as smoke. Then he pressed play. The screen flickered, then steadied. And there she was, Eleanor. My grandmother sat tall in a chair I recognized, the high-backed leather one from Harrison's office. Years of. She wore her favorite pearl necklace, the one Patricia had tried to claim at the funeral. Her hair was pinned neatly, her eyes sharper than any blade in the room. "Hello, Patricia." Her voice rang out, strong, deliberate. "If you're watching this, you've done exactly what I expected you to do." Patricia flinched as if struck. Eleanor continued, her gaze steady, her tone almost amused. "You've probably gathered Robert, James, and Linda. 12 years of. You've probably brought lawyers. You've probably tried to intimidate Grace into giving up what I left her. Let me make myself perfectly clear, you will fail." The room went utterly still. I felt my throat tighten. Tears burning the edges of my eyes. Hearing her voice again was like being pulled back into her study. The chessboard between us, her hand steadying mine over the pieces. Patricia's voice broke the silence, jagged and trembling. "This is manipulation." Quiet. Harrison's interruption was calm but commanding. He didn't look at her. His eyes stayed on the screen. Eleanor leaned forward slightly in the video. "You spent years treating Grace like an outsider. I saw it. Every cruel word, every exclusion. Every reminder that she was not your blood. You thought I was old, blind, distracted. But I saw everything." James shifted uncomfortably. Linda's nails scraped faintly against the leather of her chair. The video went on. "You called her ungrateful. You made her eat alone. You cropped her out of photos. Zuff. Sent her to community college while you paid for your children's dreams. You told her she was lucky to be under your roof. No, Patricia. You were lucky to have her under yours. Because Grace is more family than you ever chose to be." The words hit like thunder. I bit down on my lip, hard, my chest tight with the force of holding in everything. Rage, sorrow, love. On screen, Eleanor's expression softened. She looked directly into the camera, and somehow it felt as though she was looking at me. "Grace, my darling girl. Years of. You are the only one who never asked me for anything. You gave me love when I was difficult, patience when I was frail, and dignity when I was dying. That is why you inherit everything. Not because of pity, not because of guilt, but because love deserves legacy." My vision blurred. I blinked, but the tears still came. Eleanor straightened, her voice hardening again. "And if any of you try to take this from her, if you dare accuse her of manipulation or abuse, you will trigger the provisions I put in place. Financial penalties, legal consequences, and exposure of your own misconduct. Consider this your warning." Patricia's hand clenched into a fist on the table. "She's lying." But her voice faltered when Harrison produced another envelope, thick with seals. He set it in front of her like a judge laying down a sentence. "Exhibit A," he said calmly. Patricia Mitchell's email correspondence regarding how to minimize Grace's involvement after Eleanor's death. Exhibit B, Robert Mitchell's recorded conversation advising a direct challenge to the will. Exhibit C, James's text messages mocking Grace as a leech. Exhibit DC, Linda's request for a strategy to secure her share. James's face went white. Linda's lips parted in protest, but no sound came. Robert shifted, sweat beading along his temple. Patricia's fury cracked into panic. How did she? Your mother, in law, owned the family phone plan. Harrison said smoothly. She had legal access to your communications, and she used it. I almost laughed through my tears. It was exactly like Eleanor, quiet, methodical, 3 moves ahead. The video continued. Eleanor leaned back. Her voice quiet now, but deadly clear. Grace is my granddaughter, not by blood, but by choice. And if you cannot accept that, then you will accept the consequences. The screen went black. The fallout, the silence that followed was absolute. Finally, Robert broke it, his voice shaking. This is inadmissible. No court. On the contrary, Harrison cut in. Multiple witnesses were present at the recording. A physician, a retired judge, a priest. All attest to Eleanor's full competence. This is ironclad. Patricia's face twisted. This is a setup. She poisoned her against us. I leaned forward, my voice steady, cutting through her rage. No. You did that yourselves. Years of cruelty. Years of reminding me I didn't belong. You wrote this ending, Patricia. 12 years of. Grandma just made sure you couldn't change it. Her hands shook as she slammed them against the table. You think you've won? This money was meant for the family's future? It is, I said softly. Grandma's family. The one she chose. Not the one that tried to destroy me. Patricia's mask crumbled. For the first time, I saw her without the pearls, without the polished smile. Just a woman hollowed out by greed. Years of. Clinging to an illusion of control that had slipped through her fingers. You ungrateful little. New. My voice rose, firm and final. Not ungrateful. Free. With a release, for a long moment, no one moved. Then Harrison closed the tablet with a soft, decisive click. This meeting is over. Either you sign the cease and desist, or by end of day, I file the penalty clause and forward all documentation to the IRS, State Attorney General, and your employers. Robert's shoulders sagged. James stared at the table. Linda's tears spilled silently. And Patricia looked at me. For the first time in 24 years, she looked at me not as a burden, not as a problem, but as something she couldn't control. You planned this, she whispered. I shook my head. No, Grandma planned this. She loved me enough to make sure you couldn't hurt me anymore. Her breath caught. Her eyes glistened, not with tears but with rage. But she said nothing. The defining moment, I reached into my bag and pulled out a checkbook. Grandma's estate already transferred into my name. With a steady hand, I wrote out a number, $50,000. I slid it across the table. This covers every penny you spent on me. According to your receipts. Now we're even. The check sat there like a knife, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Patricia stared at it, her hand trembling. For once, she didn't reach for it. This is cruel, she whispered. No, I said, my voice strong, clear. This is consequences. The breaking point, Harrison gathered the documents, slid them neatly into his briefcase, and stood. You have until noon to sign. If you walk out without signing, you trigger every provision Eleanor set in motion. No one moved. I rose to my feet, my chair scraping softly against the marble floor. My hands no longer trembled. My voice no longer cracked. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the outsider. I wasn't the child with second-hand clothes and second-hand love. I was Grace Mitchell, Eleanor's granddaughter. The door to the conference room shut with a quiet, final click. For the first time in hours, silence felt like peace instead of tension. Harrison gathered his papers, methodical, precise, as though he had just finished any ordinary business meeting. But for me, the air felt different. Lighter. Cleaner. I stood there, watching the check I had written for Patricia still lying on the table. untouched. The irony of it struck me. All those years she demanded gratitude, begged recognition. And yet, when I offered her exact repayment, every cent, every sacrifice she claimed to have made, she recoiled. Because what she wanted was never money. What she wanted was control. And now, control was gone. Harrison glanced at me as he closed his briefcase. "Your grandmother would be proud," he said softly. "She played this game perfectly." My throat tightened. She always did. The letter before we left. Harrison reached into his pocket and handed me a sealed envelope. "She asked me to give you this only after today was over. Said you'd know when the time was right." The handwriting on the front nearly undid me. Familiar loops and flourishes. Shaky but unmistakable. Grace. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Written in her neat script, "They never deserved you, my darling girl. Now go live the life you were meant to live. All my love, Grandma." The words blurred through tears, but I pressed the letter to my chest, feeling its weight like an anchor and a sail at once. I had survived Patricia's ambush. I had faced the family that spent years reminding me I was unwanted. And I hadn't just endured. I had won. But winning wasn't the real gift Eleanor left me. 12 years of. The real gift was the freedom to finally stop fighting for a place at a table that had never been mine. The clinic 6 months later, a different set of doors opened. Not oak and marble, not a downtown law office, but glass doors, framed in steel, freshly painted with bold letters. The Eleanor Mitchell Memorial Clinic. The building stood on the east side of town, where Patricia once warned me never to go, calling it dangerous. It wasn't dangerous. It was overlooked, forgotten. The same way I had been in Patricia's house. On opening day, the line stretched down the block, mothers with children. Elderly couples clutching each other's hands, young men with hollow eyes and hesitant hope. The first patient I treated was a boy no older than 10. He needed insulin, but his family couldn't afford it. 12 years of. I handed his mother the prescription, free of charge, and watched relief melt her face into tears. "This is because of Eleanor," I told her quietly. And in her gratitude, I felt my grandmother's legacy breathing through me. Every corner of the clinic bore Eleanor's fingerprints. Not in marble or gold, but in purpose. A small portrait of her hung in the waiting room. Beneath it, a plaque read, "Love is the greatest inheritance." The unexpected visitors not everyone approved. Patricia's name still carried weight in certain circles. Rumors spread that I had manipulated Eleanor, that I was squandering the family's fortune. But with every rumor, the clinic's work spoke louder. One evening, as I was locking up, I saw James standing outside the glass doors. He looked smaller somehow, as though the weight of the past months had hollowed him out. "Impressive place," he said quietly. "Thanks." He shifted awkwardly. "Mom drove by last week. She sat in her car for an hour. Didn't come in." I didn't know what to say. James handed me an envelope. "This is from me. It's not much, but I wanted to contribute." Inside was a check for $30,000 and a note scribbled in his handwriting. "For the kids who don't belong anywhere else." I felt my throat tighten. "Thank you," I said simply. He nodded and walked away without looking back. For the first time, I realized not all bridges burned to ash. Some left embers. Small, fragile, but alive. The ghosts of family. Patricia never contacted me again. But sometimes, I'd catch whispers. Her business contracts failing, her reputation fractured. Her name spoken in hushed tones of disappointment, instead of respect. Once, I saw her car parked outside the clinic. She didn't get out. She just sat there, watching the families go in and out. Her face was pale behind the glass. For a brief moment, our eyes met through the window. And in that silent exchange, I saw everything she would never say. Regret, rage, loss. I turned away before she could see pity in my eyes. Because pity was still a form of power, and I wasn't giving her any more of that. 2. A new family. The clinic grew. We hired more doctors, more nurses. Some of them came from backgrounds like mine, people who had been told they didn't belong, now given a place to prove that they did. One evening, after the last patient left, I stood in the lobby alone. The light from Eleanor's portrait cast a soft glow on the room. I touched the frame and whispered, "We did it, Grandma?" And, for a moment, in the stillness, I swore I heard her voice again. "You were always enough, my darling girl." Always? 2. The final words. A year after that fateful meeting, I walked past a family sitting in the waiting room. A mother, father, and 2 children. The little girl clutched a teddy bear, so worn it seems barely held together. Something about her tugged at me, the way she sat a little apart, as if unsure she belonged even there. I knelt beside her. "That's a brave bear?" I said gently. She looked at me with wide eyes. "He's all I have." My chest tightened. I placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then he's enough. And so are you." She smiled, small but real. And in that moment, I felt everything come full circle. The girl with the teddy bear who once arrived at Patricia's door, now kneeling before another child, who needed the same words I had needed all along. Closing family had once been a cage for me, a word sharpened into a weapon. But now I understood. Family was never blood or obligation. It was choice. It was love. Eleanor had chosen me, and now I chose others. I stepped into the quiet evening air. Outside the clinic, the city humming in the distance. Above me, the sky stretched vast and endless, unbroken.